Hello, this is Marco Palmero. I want to talk with you about shiny object syndrome. I want to have an open conversation around this subject and share with you some life experiences and also some case studies, if we want to call them this way, associated with the business acquisition world, because I feel that shiny object syndrome is a very important topic that many people talk about, but in many cases it's not dissect in the right way, and there are no clear examples that people can use to understand how shiny object can affect their life negatively or their business negatively, and also how to fix this particular thought process or this particular chase, if we want to call it this way. So I think if we want to start with the definition of a shiny object, we can say that it is fundamentally an opportunity that sounds and looks and seems much better than what we're currently doing, and therefore it seems like an easy win, so to speak. It sounds like something that is significantly more palatable than what we have done so far, and as a consequence, to us as individuals, it seems like a no-brainer, right? And so shiny object fundamentally makes us drop everything that we're currently doing in pursuit of this new opportunity, this new money-making idea, this new career path or whatever. Unfortunately, the shiny object syndrome in itself, it's something that becomes kind of chronic, I think, because the moment we start chasing one shiny object, then we become kind of like enslaved by it. And the moment another object appears, we start chasing the other one, dropping the first one altogether. And so we create a vicious cycle where we chase one shiny object after the other, and we never actually complete anything. We never complete a project successfully because we're constantly looking for the better opportunity, and we continue to jump from one idea to the other without completing anything. And so in and of itself, I think that this first sentence is quite explanatory in giving a definition of why shiny object syndrome is kind of bad for us as people that are looking to build a business, or even people that are looking to conduct a good life. But I feel, it goes deeply into the subconscious part of our minds. And especially now with the online world being out of control, many of us, especially younger generations, have been affected by this kind of syndrome, because every single day we see new ideas popping in front of us, and everything seems much better than everything else we've seen in the past, because all the opportunities are pumped, and we can't really discern whether or not that is actually a truth statement, or whether this is just pure marketing and pure hype that people are generating around an idea. And so without the right judgment, we tend to become enslaved by it. I mean, I've seen quite a lot of people becoming enslaved by it, and I've been victim of that myself in the past. And I feel it is an interesting thing to analyze, because I feel that fundamentally this kind of will or desire to pursue something easier comes to us the moment we are at our lowest points, because every one of us has a project, at least that's what I believe, that wants to accomplish. And the moment we start working towards something, we start to face challenges and difficulties that are part of any journey. And the moment these challenges start to appear, we get tested as individuals, as business people, and we are forced into the unknown. We need to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. And that is, of course, a painful process that we need to go through. And if that process needs to be happening for a long period of time, I feel our mind looks for some kind of relief after a period of time, because he doesn't learn how to endure that type of pain in the right way. And the moment something appears in front of us that appears significantly easier, we tend to become more gullible towards that, even though down deep inside we might realize that that opportunity is not actually as good, but we kind of like want to believe because we've been through all this pain with our own journey, and all of a sudden we are offered kind of like a gilded panacea, and it seems like everything we've been looking for so long. So I feel that's one of the reasons why a lot of people fall victim of shiny objects. The fact that when the path gets hard, it becomes a lot easier to choose something that appears to be sweet and easy, instead of just keep on pushing for the hard path and continuing, what we were doing before. I also feel that to some extent, shiny objects can be something that can drive people out of. They can kind of like create a false logical behavior in our own heads, because the moment we start to pursue shiny objects, we create a logical mind path that needs to justify why we have chosen this shiny object. And so we become victim of our own logic, and we start to justify ourselves, we start to justify our choices, and we end up in a loophole where we don't really we can't really get out, because our logic is justifying our choices. And if we justify our choices logically, and we are both involved logically and emotionally into the decision of pursuit, then there's no way we're ever going to get out of the chase. And I feel that is a very dangerous behavior, but it can happen, certainly. And it has happened to me in the past. Actually, it wasn't really jumping between one opportunity to another. But I will tell you this story because I think it can potentially help somebody who might be in the same situation right now. So when I was starting my first business, I quickly grew that small company that I had, which was focused on intellectual properties, up to a point where I was taking home around 15 grand per month net profit for myself. I was around 23 at the time, so it wasn't a lot of money, but to me at the time it was a big deal, right? 15 grand was a decent amount of money for a young Italian guy, right? And at that point, I was kind of wondering how to take that business to the next level. But at the same time, I was faced with the question of, is it something better that I could be doing? Or am I working with the wrong vehicle? And maybe there's something that can dramatically or exponentially increase my results. And as I was going through that thought process, of course, I started coming across a few other shiny objects. And truth to be said, I decided to chase one of them. And interestingly enough, the pursuit of that shiny object kept my focus away from my core business. And that initial business that I had built with a lot of effort started to do worse. And of course, that was just natural because I was now focusing all my attention on chasing this new shiny object, and I wasn't paying attention to the business that I had built before. Now, as I started to realize this, I noticed that, it was very counterproductive for me to continue chase different opportunities. And at the time, I think I was also misdirected because a lot of people were kind of like, people had convinced me of the fact that you needed to diversify your income streams. Well, in reality, I wasn't really at a point where I needed to diversify because I was not generating that much money, to be frank. But I was at a point in time where I needed to be focused on what I was doing because I had found something that was working, and I just needed to push harder and grow that to consolidate that operation and increase the profit that I could take home for myself. And in reality, I didn't. So that business started to decline in, over the course of 3-6 months. And after that, I realized that I had done something terribly wrong and I needed to get back on track. And of course, it took me quite a lot of time to bring the business back to what it was before. And that was kind of like the lesson that I took home that I think I will never forget, because it kind of showed me that many times we underestimate the value of all the effort that we have put into building something to a certain level, and we overestimate the value of a new opportunity that has come along, but just because it looks fresh, beautiful, and sexy, and it doesn't seem like a lot of hard work or a lot of difficulties like the ones that we might be facing in our current business. And you might be, a person struggling with this issue. Maybe you have struggled with that in the past. I think my takeaway from this has been that until you reach a certain amount of profitability or income or what have you, focus is really all that matters, because at the very beginning, all you need to do is to focus on one thing, do it well, grow it to the stratosphere, and then you can think about diversifying. And at the time, I was putting I had the right pieces, but I was putting them in the wrong order. And so I thought, after building up a small income stream for myself, that I needed to create another one that was similar to it. But in reality, I just needed to push that one and take it to 50 grand or 100 grand a month, and then maybe do something else, or maybe even take that one to 1 million. And at that time, I think it was very interesting to notice that my logic was justifying, this chase of a shiny object, because I was saying to myself, well, I just need to diversify, because if this business dies, then I'm not going to have anything else to live with. Well, little did I know that I was killing my own business by chasing a shiny object, because I was not paying attention to what mattered the most, and I was fundamentally destroying my own company. So that was kind of like a life lesson that told me a lot about shiny objects. And I think it's very hard for us, especially if we spend a lot of time online, to kind of like keep our attention away from all these opportunities, because we're constantly bombarded by new ideas, new opportunities, new money-making opportunities. And so the best way I found to prevent myself from looking into these things is to just not look at all. And I'll give you a few more examples, which I feel can be quite interesting, because they kind of show how people fall victim of shiny object independently of how much money they make. Because in business acquisitions, we are talking about $1 million deals and transactions that are quite sizable. In business people that are quite sensible and quite knowledgeable about their industry and what they're doing, right? So we're not talking about just a startup that is started operations from scratch and a person that is on his first venture. We're talking about seasoned individuals. And yet, even in those situations, I see cases where people fall victim of shiny objects. I'll give you a couple of examples, and we will talk about both buying businesses and also selling businesses. I will give you both sides of the equation. So when it comes to buying businesses, many times I've seen people putting away a good, solid deal that was checking all the boxes simply because it seemed that a new, better deal was coming along that they could profit from and that could be much better in comparison. And I can't tell you how many times these people have been proven wrong, because independently of how good a new deal might look like, you are always going to see good things first and bad things after. And when you drop something that you've worked on for 2, 3, 6 months just to pursue something that looks maybe 5, 10, 15% better, seems like quite a stupid move, because you're throwing away the work in the consolidated effort that you put into an opportunity that you knew was right, simply to pursue an incremental gain of 10, 15%. Now, of course, if we were talking about a deal that could make you 4 or 5 times the money, then of course we might want to look at that opportunity, with different lenses, and maybe consider the idea of looking at 2 or pivot to a new deal. But I've seen so many times people pivot to another deal just to make that extra million or that extra 500,000 that didn't make sense logically, but it seemed so good emotionally, right? And the shiny object does exactly that. It attracts you with great promises, but when you look at the facts logically, it doesn't really delivers on the promise. And the point is, again, I want to stress this concept that we underestimate the value of the effort that we put in to ramp up an opportunity to a certain point. And we overestimate the value of a new, fresh deal that is coming across. And we don't see it. We will have to ramp up that opportunity to a certain point all over again. So we will start from scratch. And in some cases, we might realize throughout the path that this second opportunity was not better than the first one. But at first sight, we don't make these evaluations. We just get attracted to it and we decide to jump on it. And so I've seen quite a lot of transactions falling apart for that exact reason, simply because they felt, there's a better deal. We're just gonna maximize our profits in all circumstances. Well, in reality, if there is a transaction that does make sense and that is heading towards closing, my perspective is that it is important to pull the trigger on that and make sure that one gets done, and then potentially consider something else if it is even good. And interestingly, that happens also on the financing side. For example, if we happen to finance a transaction of any size, let's say using debt, equity, what have you, I've seen people being very concerned about getting the best deal out of banks or out of equity investors, and sometimes reject money or financing thinking they would get something better down the line. And there was a funny story of a person that got financing for a transaction in the US and decided to turn down the term sheet from the bank. It was kind of like a good term sheet with good terms, good interest rate, and so forth. Just to realize that after that, he had to spend about 10, 12 months getting another term sheet from another bank. And so I feel again, we overestimate the opportunity that is unknown, but we don't understand the value of what we have done. At least we don't understand it fully. And sometimes we are attracted by this unknown, beautiful treasure that might not actually deliver anything to us, but it seems so tasty, so sweet. And if we need to look at it from a selling perspective, there have been countless scenarios where sellers were looking to exit their business, their small business, and they were looking at potential buyers. They had a good offer on the table from a buyer, not a random buyer, private equity group, a venture capital firm, a fund, a private investor, whatever. And what happened was that they started to think they could get more out of other people, and they started to get greedy. And so that is when kind of like shiny object and greediness kicked in as a combo. And they felt there were other buyers willing to offer more, and they started to kind of like juggle between the options, hoping to jump on another ship, on another shiny object to get a higher price. Ultimately, they ended up losing the deal. And I think that's kind of like the bottom line of the shiny object, from my perspective. It is an idea that kind of like makes you feel so excited about the future and makes you feel everything is going to be easier, but in reality it might just be a lot of dust. And so I feel that both in business acquisition but also in business in general, it is important to keep our eyes on the prize. And many times when we become victim of shiny object is simply because we have experienced a lack of focus, maybe lack of purpose. There's a bit of lack of clarity in what we really want to do and what are the objectives that we want to accomplish. And at that point, we become victim of these new ideas. Because when we are, at least this is my experience, I've noticed that many times when I work with somebody over consulting or coaching sessions, or when I work on my own projects, and I am very focused on the objective that I want to achieve, it is very hard to be influenced by something external. It becomes very difficult for something to permeate in my, inner circle. I am very goal oriented and I don't let anything interfere with what I'm doing. The moment new ideas start to enter my mind is when maybe something is not going as I was expecting, or I feel the path is much harder than it should have been. Well, in reality, every path is difficult. Every path has its own challenges. And the fact that something else appears to be dramatically better doesn't make it easier or simpler. It just makes it another opportunity that will require a certain amount of sacrifice and work and diligence in order to be accomplished. But we don't see the work that is ahead of us. We just see the beautiful fruit that we can have at the end. And so I feel that is a mindset shift that I kind of had to go through. The moment I see that something is not going right with what I'm doing, I know that it is the most important time where I really need to keep my mind on the ball and avoid any potential distraction. Because I'm not gonna lie. I don't want to say that I'm that perfect individual that is not influenced by outside ideas, because I think that's rather difficult, if not impossible. And so I want to try to minimize that, especially when I am in these low points and when I need to really refocus on the objective, and I need to get clarity on what is it that I want out of my project, why is it that I want it, and how is it that I'm going to execute on that. And I think other than shiny objects, it is also very interesting to see that nowadays a lot of people share their accomplishments, and we become enslaved by other people's accomplishments because we feel their path has been easier for some reason or another, or we feel that path is a much better choice compared to the one that we have chosen. The reality is that is not true, at least from my perspective, because every single path has its own set of challenges. Everybody has shortcomings, and the simple fact that somebody is sharing his accomplishments online or publicly doesn't mean that this person didn't go through a lot of difficulties and challenges in order to get that prize. What we see is the final outcome, but we don't see the path that led to that outcome. And so sometimes we become victim of the outcome, and we feel we should pivot to another career, another project, another business model, simply because that person makes it look, it looks easier because that person already accomplished the goal. In reality, everything looked messy in the middle. And I'm sure every single person that is successful right now had terrible times heading up to that level of success. And that is totally normal. Maybe they didn't share that path, but the only thing we see is the result. And sometimes we use that as a shiny object and we become victim of it. And I think that might lead to a much longer conversation around comparing ourselves to others and becoming victim of other people results, other people achievements. And I think that is a mind game that we play on ourselves, because it's really not it's not the knowledge of inferiority of that makes us feel bad, or that makes us feel like we're not chasing the right opportunity. Is the feeling of inferiority that makes us feel this way. So it's something that is self-imposed. Nothing can make us feel bad for that. We are our own victim, and we are kind of like torturing ourselves mentally. And I think many times we believe that somebody else had it easier, or we feel that simply because a lot of people are succeeding in a certain industry, in a certain market, or with a certain business model, then we should chase that opportunity too, because it's going to be significantly easier for us too. I don't think that is the case. I feel every path has its own set of challenges and opportunities. And it's just a matter of enduring them and keeping our head focused on what matters the most. And I think to some respect, it is important to remember why we started something, because that brings a lot of clarity and helps us really get down to the basics once again and understand why we started this whole thing, and also realize all the sacrifices and efforts that we put into a project, and understand that maybe it is worth pursuing that path instead of just jumping into something else that just is random and seems sexy, but it might take twice as much time and it might not be as profitable as what we have been chasing all this time. And so it is very interesting to me to think about shiny objects, because there are quite a lot of them around. Especially in business acquisitions, there are a lot of shiny objects, both when you're trying to buy a business, but also when you're trying to sell a business. And I've seen a lot of them when I looked at buying businesses for myself, but also when I work with people on coaching and consulting sessions to help them either buy or acquire small businesses around the world. And it's so important to stick to that, because business acquisitions are a relatively long process, and without clarity and without focus, you're going to be distracted by a lot of other shiny objects along the way. And so the moment you realize that you need to stay focused, it is important to create pillars and boundaries that are going to protect you as you move along and as you proceed. And also, at least from my perspective, it is important to have an accountability system that can either be something that you create for yourself or something that you do with somebody else that helps you throughout the journey. Because otherwise, again, there are going to be a lot other opportunities that seem a lot easier and a lot faster compared to a business acquisition that are going to deviate your attention and going to take you on the wrong path. And so I think these are my considerations on shiny objects. There are a lot of things that I could talk about, because I was also going down the path of our psychological comparison to others when we look at accomplishments in the business arena, but also in life. But I think that's probably a good topic for another video. This was more around shiny objects, which I feel are a problem in today's society. But yeah, hopefully this video can add some value to you, and my life experience can save you some mistakes. I think overall, chasing shiny objects is not really meaningful, because every path is difficult, and it's just a matter of choosing what you really want to do and then work at it until you make it a success. And there's really nothing else. Everybody telling you there is a gimmick or there is a secret trick or a fancy tool is just trying to sell you another gimmick or another shiny object. The reality of it is you can be successful in anything you do. It's just a matter of picking something and sticking to it until you make it a success. That's just my take. So hopefully this helps, and I'll see you in the next one.